Hello everyone. So I'm just going to give a warm welcome to Jenny, who's coming here to give us a talk about being an HR manager from Lyft. And I just want to give a quick thank you for coming to give us a talk when she's probably really busy. So whenever you're ready, just
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And my voice sounds a little funny because I do have a cold. So apologies if I need to cough or blow my nose. I was told that this could be pretty informal. I know we're a small group, so I really want to just answer as many questions as possible. Brief introduction. Again, my name is Jenny Weston. I've worked in kind of the tech space for the past decade. I was working at a company called Warby Parker. I don't know if anyone has, a pair of their eyeglasses when they were a really early stage company. And for the past 6, almost 7 years, I've been working at a company called Lyft. Maybe you've taken a ride before. So I've always worked in the tech space, but I wouldn't say I'm a very techie person. I'm not on the STEM side of the house, but I've been working in human resources. First as a recruiter, and then for the majority of my time, I've been working in learning and development. So my job is actually to create and lead trainings for our employees at various levels, usually around kind of management skills, but I've done a little bit of, working with all sorts of different audiences, just whatever they need to do their best work. So sometimes that's really basic things like how to have a difficult conversation, how to give feedback to your colleagues or to your boss or to the folks you manage. Sometimes it's something more topical, like I just led a workshop on how to lead hybrid and remote meetings, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with, whether that's in Zoom or, we actually use Google Meets at Lyft. So that's just a little intro, but I would love to answer any questions. I also have a little activity we could do, but no pressure. That's just if, if there aren't enough questions, I can always run us through something. Okay, I got a question in the chat. So what does a typical day look like for me? Great question. So a typical day, I'm going to pick Tuesdays because that's the day I actually lead a training every week. So on Tuesdays, I wake up and I lead a training for experienced managers. The topic changes each week. People go through our program for a month and then switch on to a new program. So for example, this Tuesday was leading a session about emotional intelligence. So I did that for a couple of hours. I really enjoy that because we have folks, who take that training from all different areas of the business. So we'll have engineers in there, folks who work in product, but then also someone from the sales team or customer support. So it's always really interesting to hear different questions, from different lines of the business. After that, I typically have a lot of meetings because I'm also a people manager. So I manage a whole bunch of people who are also working in learning and development. So I'll meet with them to see how things are going with their projects, see if there's any, roadblocks or give some coaching. And then, I usually have some independent work as well. So in addition to leading trainings, I manage a few other work streams. So that could be actually like some quiet time to actually develop a new training we have. Or maybe I'm working on process improvement. That's actually another big part of my role. Right now we're trying to figure out what's the best way to not just do performance reviews, which is looking backwards at how someone performed, but how do we really identify our high potential team members and how can we invest in them going forward? So making sure they have stretch projects on their plate, as an example. Oh, good. Okay, more questions in the chat. So that was a typical day. So questions about internships to work at Lyft. So we do offer, I believe, some internships Definitely some in engineering. I think there might be others as well, but they're not available for high school students, unfortunately. This is for college students. So I wish we had stuff available for high school, but you'd have to wait a couple more years. Um, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job? You know, what I really love about my job is that I get to teach skills that are relevant both at work and at home. So, like, if we take that example of how to give feedback or how to have a difficult conversation, I get folks who come to me and say, "Thank you so much. I like finally had a productive conversation with my wife." Like, I just love that these skills can transcend the workplace. And the other thing I just really appreciate is that regardless of how many years of experience you have, there's so much value in hearing from other people in the room. So even though maybe I'm the trainer and I have a specific slideshow to walk through, that doesn't mean I'm, the smartest person in the room. It means I'm the facilitator. And of course, I do have experience with whatever skills we're teaching, but I love hearing from other people and their experiences. So if someone asks me a question, like, what would you do in this scenario? It's always really nice to turn it around and say, well, what do people think? Because, everyone has their own ideas and perspectives. And sometimes together we can come up with an even better answer than, the one maybe I already had in my head. So that's the rewarding part. So could a first year of college student get an internship? I can check on this online. All of this would be available on the Lyft job site, so I can find that link and send it around. I'm not sure if there are requirements. It might be that you have to be, junior or senior year of college, because they really are trying to get folks who are going to come back when they graduate and work for Lyft. But I would need to double check that. So how to get into HR at Lyft? So, and yeah, could I talk about the background and how I got the job? Absolutely. So, I mentioned I actually worked at Warby Parker before Lyft, and Warby Parker was a much smaller company than Lyft. So I think when I joined Warby Parker, there were less than 100 people. And I actually got my first job doing customer support, which was not my dream job, but I really liked the company Warby Parker, and I saw that they were very early stage. And I had a feeling that if I got in there early on, I might be able to kind of carve out my own path. And so that's what happened. I, worked really hard in customer support and then ended up getting a promotion, applying to another job still at Warby Parker as a recruiter. So that's how I actually got into HR, through the recruiting pathway. But once I was a recruiter, I again was able to kind of prove to be a really good recruiter, and then also say, hey, I noticed we're bringing in all these phenomenal people into the company, but we don't have a lot of training available for them. So some people are getting bored, they feel like they're not learning new skills, and they're leaving the company. Could I start offering some trainings? I'll do recruiting part-time, and I'll do, learning and development training work the other half of my time. And I was able to get that approved. So I wanted to mention that because, again, it was a little bit of a risk. I thought, okay, customer support, not my dream job, but I like the company enough that I want to see if I can prove myself and then kind of make my way into a line, a job that's a bit more interesting to me. And then that was Warby Parker. When I wanted to get a job at Lyft, I also actually took a bit of a risk. I didn't know much about Lyft. This was 6.5 years ago. So Lyft wasn't a very well-known company, but they had a job opening. And, at the time I was just constantly Googling, looking on Indeed.com and job sites to try to find a role in learning and development, because that's eventually what I was doing at Warby Parker, and I really loved it. There was a job opening for someone to come in and handle the new hire experience. So actually leading new hire orientation and doing a lot of the behind the scenes work on that program. And that seemed interesting to me. It also wasn't my dream job. I didn't want to do something quite so repetitive because I had to lead the same training every single Monday and Tuesday of every week with a new set of new hires. But similar to Warby Parker, I thought, okay, Lyft is growing a lot. I can go in, I can make this program really awesome, and then I could probably move into a more general learning and development role. And that's what happened for me. And I do think that's a great benefit of joining companies a little bit smaller when there's going to be a lot of growth, because it just means there's going to be a lot of internal mobility opportunities. So a lot of those companies, whether you get to, have coffee chats with folks who are in roles that are interesting, or some more established companies will have a job site specific to internal candidates. So it makes it a lot easier once you're already in the door to see if there's a different role that might be more interesting. My one caveat there, though, is no one wants you to take a job and then tell them that you didn't actually want this job. So this is after doing that job very well for maybe a year and a half, and then you can start looking for that other job. So you don't want to burn any bridges. I should also mention HR is it's a very big part of the business. So I work in learning and development. That's very specific. There's so many other aspects of HR. You could be the person who deals with employees, like employee relations or struggling team members. You could work in benefits and payroll. You could work on strategy, like how do we want to think about our culture? How do we want to ensure that team members are engaged? There's a lot of different pieces within the HR function. So I just wanted to point that out. So what is the most exciting part for a girl to join Lyft? So I think something that's really important at whatever job you're interested in is, of course, you want to make sure that whether you're a girl or a boy, you are going to be respected. And so I was really drawn to Lyft because they have great values. Like one of their values is to uplift others. And that's really not just something they talk about, but even in your performance reviews, they assess people and say, do you live by these values? Are you uplifting others? They lead trainings on unconscious bias to make sure, although we can't totally get rid of our unconscious biases, that people are aware of them. So they know that, for example, you're more, as a woman, you're more likely to get feedback that has the word aggressive, like you're aggressive just because maybe you speak up more, whereas a guy is much less likely to get feedback with that word aggressive. So that's really makes Lyft a great place to work because people are aware of biases and trying really hard to combat them and, to call them out in others. Depending on what area of the business you go into, it's going to depend how many other women there are around you. So for me, working in HR, that just tends to be actually a very female dominant part of the business. So I work with a lot of women on my team, but then when I lead trainings, it's a lot of men. So it's an interesting dynamic, but definitely Lyft and a lot of companies have goals to have, more women, especially on the tech side of things. But I haven't had that experience of being, the one woman on a team. And I know other people at Lyft probably have if they're more so on the tech side. All right. Can I talk about, hold on, let me scroll up, the interview process for a programmer. So because I don't do recruiting at Lyft, I actually don't know all of the steps. But typically for our interviews, it's a mix of both behavioral interview questions. And what that means is they're saying, can you tell me about a time you had to, problem solve in a previous internship or job or at school? So, if they need someone who has the ability to problem solve, they're going to ask you to give examples of you problem solving in the past. That's a behavioral based interview question. Or tell me about a time you had to give someone tough feedback. That's one part of the interview process. And then there's typically a homework assignment as well. So for a programmer, that might look like, a coding assignment. For my work, it's actually, come up with a training on this topic and then walk us through it. So it really depends on the role. And I don't know enough about the programmer one. Okay, I want to talk about the pros and cons of Lyft as both an employee and as a customer. Sure. So I think I mentioned that one of the pros is definitely that its values are really prominent. Something else that I've always really appreciated about Lyft is that our co-founders are really transparent, which I think has really helped me learn more about the business. So as an example, once a month, we have a company-wide meeting and people are in offices, all over. So it's virtual these days. But they get up there and they talk about, what did we do right this past month? Where did we make mistakes? What are our core objectives for the next 6 months? How are we progressing towards them? So that's something I really appreciate because it helps me get away from just my small world of learning and development where I don't really know what's going on in the business. And then I get to understand, what it's actually like for Lyft to try to succeed in this environment. So I think it's helped me understand business a bit more, and then also just have a bit more faith in the leaders by actually having that transparent communication. Another thing they do is they let anyone ask questions in those meetings, which has been really intense because, these leaders get put on the spot and they're asked a really tough question by an employee, and they have to navigate that. But again, that has built up a lot of trust because we know that they're willing to answer those tough questions. Cons of working at Lyft, I would say, is that it is a very competitive space. So Uber is a big competitor of ours. And, just at a high level, that means that there's a lot of, pressure, stress to succeed, to, do things faster than competitors, to get things right. And so we do move really quickly. And sometimes that also means we have to pivot. So we're, maybe we have a big project that's supposed to be our number one priority, and we actually decide we need to shift and focus on something else. And that can feel kind of painful as an employee. You have been doing all this work and now you need to shift and work on something else. So it can feel, just a little chaotic, but at the same time, it also keeps it exciting. From a customer perspective, I'm biased because I work for Lyft, but I think that Lyft, does a lot to treat their drivers well. So that makes me feel lucky and like I want to support Lyft and take more rides with them. But again, I work for Lyft, so I'm biased there. Next question. Do I interact a lot with members of other areas of Lyft? And what have I learned from those experiences? I do, because people from all different areas come to the trainings that I'm a part of. That's like the majority of time I interact with them. My biggest takeaway actually is that regardless of your title, the area of the business that you sit in, people face very similar challenges. So as an example, everyone's struggling with burnout right now, even just like the mental exhaustion of dealing with COVID and having to keep going to work and get through it. And so, I find that people are more similar than they are different. That said, though, of course, people have their own unique challenges. And mostly, sometimes people come to my trainings and, they'll have a specific example of a situation that they're working on. And I just realized that yeah, every job is hard because, the struggles an engineer has, again, although maybe similar with dealing with burnout or resilience, can also be wildly different from the experiences that I face because, they could be leading a team of like 120 people, whereas I lead a team of 5. So it's just really interesting to see everyone's unique challenges. All right. What advice would I give to a high school student on skills and knowledge he or she should acquire in high school? What general skills would you consider essential when you hire someone for Lyft? It's a great question. So, I mentioned that Lyft is a little bit chaotic, that things are moving fast. That's something that I think you probably all have already dealt with, even with, any changes you had to face with COVID, whether that was, switching from in person learning to virtual for a bit of time. But that skill set of being resilient, of being able to face a challenge and adapt is just such an essential skill set, I think, for anyone who wants to work at a company that's going to be moving really quickly. So don't discount probably the problems that you've already faced and how you've worked through them. Those will be great things to talk about in an interview. And so whether it's the way that you navigated a difficult situation, or just any time you basically didn't give up, that's a really important skill set. I also think organization and an attention to detail are pretty essential for any job. So that's something that you can constantly be working on. What is your system for staying organized? That's actually a question we often ask in interviews because we want to know, how does this person keep on top of things? So, do you use good old fashioned paper and pen and you're checking things off the list? Do you use a tool, like Trello? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's a lot of online tools to help you do task management. How do you stay super organized? That'll be a really helpful thing. And then, communication. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but the more you can kind of raise your hand for speaking events or just raise your hand in class to answer a question, that's such good practice to be able to communicate on the spot, which I know can be scary. I public speak a lot for my job and I still get nervous before I do it. So the more practice, the better. The other piece too is like, regardless of your job, you're going to be interacting with different types of people, and people have very different styles. So I've mentioned feedback before, but learning how to give feedback is such a critical skill. Whether that's, you could practice with a parent, a friend. I'm sure your friends have, done things that have bothered you. I know when I was younger, I would kind of just let them slide, but it's such an important skill for life to be able to say specifically, hey, Sarah, when you said X to me, it hurt my feelings and I want to talk about it with you. So try to have those conversations, even though they're uncomfortable, because if you don't, that person might never know, that what they did had an impact on you, and keep doing it. All right. Is there a Lyft hiring freeze? So, Lyft is slowing down hiring a bit right now. Some teams are not hiring, but that's not meant to be, it's not going to last too long, hopefully. It just right now as we kind of do a reprioritization effort. So I'm not too worried about hiring freezing. And I don't think it will impact internships, but I can't say for sure. But I have a feeling, especially with our engineering internships, we're always looking for more engineers. Okay. So stay on if you want to do an activity, and you won't hurt my feelings if you want to end the call and get to something else. But I did want to run you all through an activity that I'm a big fan of. So let me actually share my screen for a second. So this activity is called the Wheel of Life. I did not invent this. This actually comes from coactive coaching. This is a coaching model, and I'm a certified coach. However, I've also seen teachers use it with high school students. So I thought if you haven't done this yet, it would be a really nice activity. The point of this activity is actually to help us zoom out. I don't know about you, but when I lead trainings and talk to folks at Lyft, I find that people are super duper focused on their career, which makes sense. We spend a lot of time at work. If I had to guess, I would guess that a lot of you are super focused on school right now. But I don't know about you, but when I think about having a meaningful life, I know that it's more than just school or more than just career. There's a lot that goes into it. And so this exercise is really, again, just to help us zoom out and take stock at some of the different slices of the pie, some of the different areas of our life. And to actually take a moment to ask ourselves, how satisfied am I in these different areas of my life? Now, what I have on the screen right here is just an example. Maybe these are the things that make up your life right now: school, your grades, your family, your friends, your health, how much fun you're having, your room. That's like your physical environment. Are you happy in your room at home? Your growth. So I'm talking about personal growth. Do you feel like you're learning and growing, not just in school, but in all things life? Now, maybe there's pieces that are missing here, like maybe, I don't know, spirituality is really important to you, or maybe you have a significant other and you want to put them on this in this circle. You can absolutely do that. Let me just check the chat. Okay, there we go. So what I will do is actually put this link in the chat. So I don't know if you all use Google Docs, but if you open up, first, actually, can everyone try to open that and tell me if it works? Oh, good. I see some logos in here or icons. If you click on File and make a copy, you should be able to make one for yourself. So I'd be like, Jenny, Wheel of Life. It'll take a second to make the copy, but now you have a version that you can type in and make notes in. So this is just a picture. You won't be able to add anything here, but if you scroll down, I want you to, we'll just spend a few minutes quietly doing this. Ask yourself, okay, school, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would I rate my current level of satisfaction? So 10 means like, I'm super happy. I'm really engaged in this. I feel like things are going well. 1 would be, I probably need to focus more. I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied in this area. And again, these are just samples. If you want to cross one out or add something else in, be my guest. No one's going to see this doc that you're making a copy of but you. But let's spend a few minutes actually giving ourselves a little score. And once you've given yourself, I don't like to use the word scores because they're not really scores, but once you've given your numbers, we'd love for you to also just do a bit of reflecting. So what is one section that you want to celebrate? And maybe that's because, it's a really high number, or maybe it's actually because, it's not a high number, but you've seen some change, like it's improved, in the past couple of months. And then similarly, what's section that you want to focus more on? So again, doesn't necessarily mean it's the lowest number, but what's something where when you wrote down that number, it didn't feel good. You realize like, oh, this is something I want to focus on more. All right. Not sure if you're done. If not, I hope that you'll spend a bit more time thinking about this. Again, my hope here is that it's helped you zoom out a bit and number one, have a moment of, celebration of gratitude for what's going really well in your life. And then number two, maybe helped you identify an area that you want to focus more on. and maybe it's not about school, but it's actually about having more fun. What can you do about it? Can you commit to maybe one small thing that will help you have a little bit more fun? I actually did this activity recently and realized I wanted to cook some more. That's fun for me. And I hadn't been making much time for it. So that's what I'm going to be doing after this. I'm going to be making some chicken soup from scratch. Well, not the chicken, but you know what I mean. So if you're willing, I would love for you to put into the chat maybe just one thing that you're celebrating today, one area that you're grateful for. But if it's, feeling a little bit too personal, that's okay too. Um, Hopefully you'll just have this for you then. But if you're willing, would love for you to put it in the chat. All right. Well, that was an activity. This really is something that I do with employees at Lyft. You might think it seems a little bit basic, but really, at any age, regardless of your role, this is a really helpful exercise and something that you can do often. I recommend people do it every quarter. So, every 4 months, just to have another snapshot of how am I doing? What progress have I made since last time? And is there anywhere I need to kind of shift my focus? Because we can't focus on everything at once. So, can you be more conscious about where you're putting your attention? All right. Well, that's really all I had for you. If there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'll also put my email address into the chat. This is my personal email. But if you have any questions, you can definitely email me. I did find the link for, it's called like the early talent at Lyft. But when I was looking for it, I think there isn't info right now about internships, because I should have mentioned our interns are summer internships. And so we already, have all of our summer interns for this year. But that's where info will be about them for next summer, for example. All right, everyone.
I want to thank everybody for coming, and also obviously thank you to our guest Jenny for giving us the talk.
Yeah,
And
thanks, Cindy. I appreciate it. Well, definitely, yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and have a good rest of your evening. Okay, bye.